on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kyle, and if it's your first time tuning in, please smash the subscribe button. If it's not your first time tuning in, I want to thank you guys for your continued support. Today I'm going to go over the 9.5, the Saab 9.5. A lot of people have reached out asking me what to look for when they're buying these cars, so I figured it'd be a great time to go ahead and put together a nice video and a mileage range. I'm going to give you a mileage range. Of course, age and all these things come into effect, and also how the previous owner treated the car. Okay, that's why I'm going to give a wide range of mileage. Okay, just an area to look into when you are purchasing these cars. The Saab 9.5, if you are new to the channel, is one of my favorite cars that Saab ever built. Not only because I'm biased, since it's where I started my Saab passion. I had a 9.5. I drove all the way up to 200,000 miles before I sold it, and when I sold it, it was in brand new condition, like new. I mean, we put a lot of money into it. Did blow through a transmission. Never sludged an engine before in a Saab, so I guess that's one failure that I've prevented all of my Saab careers. I'm gonna go through all of the different things and mileage range when you're shopping these cars to look for. So if you are gonna purchase one of these, they're never too old and they're always too young if you are gonna buy one. So keep that in mind. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you have any questions you want to reach out, follow me at Pancis on Instagram. So stay tuned, enjoy this video. All right guys, so I'm gonna start at the top of the car, under the hood. And the first things first, when you go ahead and look at any of these Saabs from this era, the first thing you want to do is inspect around the valve cover gasket. The reason why you want to check around the valve cover gasket is because if your crank pressure in the engine is not good, you're going to be getting you're going to get oil leaking from the valve cover and other parts of the engine. The other weak points of the engine will come on the valve chain cover area, which, depending on the miles of the car, will depend on how bad the leaking is and if it's been maintained. Okay, but the first weakest point is the valve cover, and the other weak points will be the valve chain cover, or the timing chain cover, and then of course the timing chain tensioner, which is right behind the valve cover, right in this area. Okay, those are the weak points for oil. The next weak point will be the oil pan gasket. So I always inspect underneath the oil pan. Now look, I just did everything. Now I just did all of the maintenance on this car, and as you can see, there is no oil leaking anywhere. And I have about 500 miles on this car. Since we refurbished the car, I've driven about 500 miles or so, so everything is good. Now if we go underneath, you'll notice that everything is nice and dry around the oil pan. And that's because I not only did all of the seals, but I also replaced the check valve. Okay, the check valve on these engines is right here, this little white piece right there. Okay, in this car, it's a $10 part. In the newer models from 03, 04 up, the later 03 years and 04 up is a little bit larger than that. All right guys, so that's the first thing I checked. The next thing you gotta realize, if the car ranges anywhere from about 80,000 miles to about 100,000 miles, those valves need to be changed. The next thing that you need to look for or know in that mileage range is the engine mounts. The engine mounts are on this car right here. This one will fail. The torque mount, which is right down there, it's actually right about over here where my finger is. Those two mounts plus the rear damper mount are weak points of the engine. So about 80,000 miles to about 100,000 miles in that area, those should be changed. So if you're buying the car between 80 and 100,000 miles, make sure the previous owner had changed those mounts. If they haven't changed those mounts, be sure to check into that. They're not that expensive depending on the mount. So that takes care of oil leaks, engine mounts. Make sure that this car, no matter what age and how many miles, it's always had an oil change. I always use a 5W30 full synthetic oil in this car. Make sure you change them every 5,000 miles. That's what I've done. I've driven, like I said, 200,000 miles on these engines with no problem with that oil cycle and oil type. So be sure that if you're driving this car or buying this car, no matter what, make sure that that's been done. If it's been used and abused, make sure you pull the oil pan. There are videos that I've done pulling oil pans. I can link a couple above to give you an overview and a detailed version of that. I did the oil pan on this car, and that is to clean out all of the sludge. Okay, if this car if these 9.5s, if you find them over 100,000 miles, 120,000 miles, 130,000 miles plus, and the oil pan has never been dropped, that's the first thing I would do, because the seals that are inside the oil pan will go bad, and those will cause an oil pressure drop, which will then sludge the engine and blow the engine. So make sure anything 120,000 miles plus, be sure to pull the oil pan regardless of any oil leaking or anything. Just change those seals. They're like a couple dollars, and if you're gonna do the oil pan yourself, it's really just a couple hours of work on the garage, and you save yourself an engine. Be sure to check into that. That takes care of 80 to 100,000. Also, one other thing, 80 to 100,000 is the OEM. SEM is who made this cassette, the direct ignition cassette. Make sure that this gets changed anywhere between 80 and 120,000 miles. It's a really wide range, okay? But the reason why is because you can get 100,000 miles out of these cassettes. I've personally had 100,000 miles on a cassette, and that's if you're changing the NGK plugs every 15 to 20,000 miles, which again, it's about $2 a plug. You got 4 plugs. So for $10, let's just call it $15, right? For $15, every 20,000 miles, I change the NGK plugs to keep them fresh. What that does is allow you to have a longer lasting life on the cassette, because the cassette will not be working as hard to give your car the power it needs through those plugs. So change those plugs out. The cassette you can get anywhere from 80 to 100,000 miles. If you have a car, if you're looking at a car with 120,000 miles, 130,000 miles, make sure you find out if they replace that with an OEM Saab cassette. If it's not an OEM Saab cassette, it can leave you stranded on the road. Okay, that's that. So 130,000 miles, up to 130,000 miles, brakes, tires, oil changes, cassette plugs, engine mounts, fluid changes. That's the stuff you need to look for. If you're looking at a car between 125,000 miles to 150,000 miles, make sure that the alternator's been changed. Okay, an alternator can range anywhere from 120 to 150,000 miles. Sometimes you can squeeze out a couple thousand miles more on an alternator than that, but in that area, if you're looking at a Saab between 120 and 150,000, make sure that the alternator has been changed. In terms of suspension, all of the bushings, listen, if you're gonna do the bushings and they're knocking anywhere 100,000 plus, check out the suspension. When I say check out the suspension, I'm talking about sway bar links and sway bar bushings. They're not expensive pieces, not expensive parts to replace. So, and any do-it-yourselfer can go ahead and do it. If you guys want, I can do a video on that, but that's another thing to look for. Anything from 130 to 170,000 miles, make sure that the car has an updated, brand new fuel pump, because the fuel pump on these cars will go anywhere, I would say an average about 140, 150,000 miles. They need to be replaced on these cars. And if you're not familiar, the fuel pump is really easy to replace. I actually replaced it, not on this car, but on another Saab, because this car's got 130,000 on it, so it is not too bad. But right underneath the seat right here is the fuel pump. Probably about 45 minutes of work, and $100 part, $150 part replaces that. So that takes care of everything between 80 and 150 miles, 80 to 170,000 miles. Now you have some sensors in there, but sensors are sensors, you replace them as you go. When I'm talking sensors, I'm talking about bypass valves, pressure sensors, the intake sensor here, the mass airflow sensor can go bad. I've personally, knock on wood, have never had one go bad, but I have had a throttle body go bad. So throttle bodies can go bad. You can find them cheap from a junkyard if they're tested, or you can buy them new for a couple $100. That's right under here. Again, very easy to replace. Hold on. There's the valve cover, or there's the throttle body right there. Now, again, not too bad, not too hard to replace. Now that I'm here, it reminds me I'm missing right here a little vacuum line hose, so I gotta find where that is and put it on there. Vacuum lines, 100,000 miles plus, replace regardless, unless they've been replaced. About 100,000 miles, you're good on vacuum lines. These vacuum lines have been replaced. As you can see, I replaced them. All right, those can shed and leak, which causes boost pressure leaks. And now that I'm noticing that, I was noticing a loss of boost, so I'm glad I pulled this off. Let me go ahead and find that part, put it on there. All right, so we're talking about vacuum lines. This is a perfect example. It looks like I forgot to replace this vacuum line. You can see how it's corroded and falling apart. I just rehooked it, but this thing needs to be replaced. It's not in good shape. So there is a perfect example at 130,000 miles of your vacuum lines being no bueno, no good. So far, so good here, right guys? Am I keeping you up? All right, next thing on the list. If you have a car with 150 to 170,000 miles, I would take the time and go ahead and replace all of your hoses for the cooling system. There's one upper hose here, there's a heater core hose here, and a couple other small ones that you can go ahead and replace. 150, 170. Listen, I usually replace them as they fail, but if you want a car that you can hop in and drive across the country and know that nothing ever is gonna go wrong, then I suggest just going ahead, taking the time and replacing those parts. I will link all of the parts in the description below. So if you are shopping this car or a 9.3 similar era, they're very similar platforms and engines. So the things that I'm talking about on the 9.5 can be as well for the 9.3 in this generation. So I will link all of the parts that I'm talking about in the description. You guys can go ahead, if you're buying this car and shopping one, you can just go ahead and load up the parts that you need and go ahead and replace them. I think that's pretty much it on the top of the engine. In terms of anything else in the engine bay, the water pump is over here. The water pump can go at any given time. So, I mean, listen, 70, 80,000 miles, 80 to 100,000 miles you can get on a water pump. So if you're buying a car between 80 and 100, just check with the previous owner if they replaced it. If not, you know, just keep driving the car until it goes. I mean, that's just kind of how that goes. You just replace those things as they fail. That's pretty much it under the hood. I like to service the transmission on these things every 25,000 miles and or 2 years. So every other year or 25,000 miles, I like to go ahead and service the trans. I've done a video on that, so I can show you that. It's pretty easy to do. I think that's pretty much it under the hood. Everything else is self-explanatory here. Fluids, you know, you just change them, monitor them. These cars are pretty straightforward, guys. A lot of quirkiness sometimes, but for the most part, pretty straightforward. In terms of anything between 170 and 200,000 miles, you're gonna probably have suspension work if the struts haven't been replaced. The struts can be replaced. Listen, the struts can go 130,000 miles on a car. So I would suggest that if you have a car with 150,000 plus and haven't done the struts, then I would suggest looking into struts. In terms of the rear suspension on the car, guys, the rear suspension, I have driven 200,000 miles on the rear suspension of these Saabs and had no problems on the stock suspension. So be sure that, you know, listen, just touch the car, you know, push down on it if you're inspecting and you're gonna go by. Make sure that, it feels good. In terms of the flex pipe on these cars tend to go bad very easily. Flex pipes, again, can last about 80 to 100,000 miles in that range, and they probably need to be replaced every 80,000 miles. So you guys do the math. 160,000 miles, if you're shopping a Saab with 160,000 miles, expect to find an exhaust leak, and expect that exhaust leak to be from the flex pipe. From the center section back, depending on the condition of the car, where it's stored through the lifetime, if it's stored inside the garage, outside the garage. I've driven my previous Saab 9.5 about 180,000 miles until the exhaust system needed to be replaced from the center exhaust to the muffler, right? The whole thing just rotted out. So 180,000 you can get on a stock exhaust. So if you're buying something with 150 to 170,000, just expect that at some point in the near future of that car's life, you will need to do the exhaust system on it. It's really not that big of a deal. A couple $100, some labor fixes that problem. So that's in terms of hard maintenance. I might be forgetting some little details, but those are the major things that come to mind with these cars that are common failures and things to look at. So if you are shopping a 9.5, in those mileage ranges that I've listed. Those are the things I would point out with the owner if you're shopping with the owner, or if you're shopping at a dealership, ask and see if they have the records. If not, you know, inspect it yourself, use your judgment, and good luck buying it. You know, listen, there's a lot of support in the Saab community. There's myself and a couple other Saabers on YouTube, plus amazing chat forums and Facebook groups. So if you have any questions once you buy a Saab, shouldn't be an issue. I'm gonna hop in the car, which I've been in. We're gonna fire her up. So inside the Saab, inside your 9.5, everything's pretty much self-explanatory. This car, luckily, the previous owner had replaced all of the interior lights with LED lights, including the fasten seatbelt lights. So these bulbs can go bad, including the reading light. They don't really go bad, the reading light, but these bulbs here for the fasten belts will go bad. And of course, there's LED lights. I don't know if you can see it, there's LED lights right here. These can go bad, so switching them to LEDs, not too big of a deal. Inside the car, this car seems to be in good shape, thankfully, knock on wood, but the LED screens can go bad, the pixels. This could be just depending on the climate of the car and how the car is taken care of, you know, so there's no mileage per se on these things, but just look at them. If the pixels are no good, there are kits online to get for at least, you know, 60, 70, 30 bucks, 80 bucks, depending on what it is, to replace it. It's very straightforward and very easy to do. So if there's an issue with these pixels, do not get intimidated. Very easy to replace on both units. There are light bulbs that can go bad on the switches. You just pull the panel out, you know, pull these out, and they're right there for you to replace on the buttons and anywhere on here. It's very easy to do. In terms of light bulbs over here on the center dash, again, those can be a little bit more of a pain, but you can just remove the dash panel here and pull the screen out and replace the bulbs, which I've never done personally, but I know how to remove it. It's not too difficult. And that's about it, guys. If you're gonna be shopping a 9.5 and it's under 200,000, I think I just covered everything that you need to look out for. It's really straightforward. Again, I've done a video on this. I've done a video on the 9.5 of everything I look for when I maintain the car or when I'm doing an oil change, just to take precaution and, you know, maintenance and all that good stuff. So I'll link that above for you guys to review. You can go ahead and check that video out. But as for anything else, let me know if you have any questions in the description or in the comment section below. You guys can also, again, follow me at Kyle Pancis on Instagram. Always happy to help, answer questions. And that's pretty much it for this video. Just a quick vlog update for you on if you're shopping a 9.5, the things to look for, or if you have a 9.5 and you're at these mileage points and you're not too familiar, you know, those are the major things that you can go ahead and check out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like, share, and subscribe. And again, I'm still waiting for DMVs and everything to open up, because I do have some other projects on my to-do list, but I can't, like, this car is sold, so like I'm waiting for the, you know, the next guy to pick it up or ship it, whatever he wants to do. So as soon as that's done, I can go ahead and move on. We're gonna do some more projects on the channel. We're going into season, and I'm excited to announce that as those things come. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, like, share, subscribe, and again, follow me at Kyle Pancis. If you guys have any questions, I'm here for you. Have a great day. All right, boys, so here's what the car is like now that I have all those vacuum lines hooked up. Man, I wasn't getting a full boost, and now I know why. It's a good thing I checked. Check it out. Nice.